I want to welcome you to another episode of the Weight Care Podcast, conversations about a new era of weight management and GLP-1 weight loss medications. I'm Sharon Polsky, your host, and I am your GLP-1 fact fairy. And today we are going to have a conversation with Dr. Jones about some very important hormones that affect obesity, and they are insulin, leptin, and ghrelin. And I think that there's a lot of shame and blame around obesity. And doctors are not explaining to people like yourselves that you are not to blame, that you have some kind of metabolic disconnect that is affecting your body's ability to use the energy, which is food or drink, that is put into it. And leptin can affect this, ghrelin can affect this, and insulin can affect this. And we find that the majority of people that struggle with weight are insulin resistant. So Dr. Jones and I are going to talk about that today. Stay tuned. I want to welcome you back to the Weight Care Podcast. I'm Sharon Polsky, your GLP-1 fact fairy, and I am joined by Dr. Jones. And Dr. Jones is a functional medicine doctor, chiropractor. He's based in Colorado. He's got an amazing practice in Colorado where he takes your GLP-1 weight loss medications and combines it with coaching. His goal is that you don't have to live on these the rest of your life. And he created a really cool coaching program around that. And I've been following him for some time. And he and I are going to have a conversation about why being overweight is not your fault. And there's a lot of hormones at play that affect that: insulin, leptin, ghrelin. And so we are going to talk about that today. Welcome, Dr. Jones.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, no, it's, I absolutely love talking about this stuff.
Me too. I always say it's my love language, these conversations.
Yeah.
So Dr. Jones, tell us a little bit about your practice.
Yeah. So we're all virtual now. So, we had a couple of physical locations. We closed them down actually earlier this year. And so we're all virtual. We service all 50 states. My medical team are the one that handle the prescription. So I have medical staff. We've been dealing with hormone therapies for like the last 9 years, BHRT therapy, HRT for men and women, always optimizing them in a more functional perspective and an approach. We've been utilizing peptide therapy since basically they kind of started, right? Since I heard of them, but just basically near the beginning, back in the tailor-made days when, Dr. C's was just kind of getting it out there. So that was awesome to watch this whole peptide thing evolve. And then of course, GLP-1s the last several years. And so for me, I've always been very, very passionate about optimizing health, improving function, reducing prescriptions, preventing surgeries. But we've always really it's never just been weight loss, even though I have my personal journey. And the GLP-1s somehow just kind of, I guess you could say, made my weight loss programs better. And then all of a sudden got my attention. And then when I started putting my attention on it, then I realized, wait a minute, this is my calling. This is my passion. And so that's really, we still do the hormones, we still do the peptides, but I definitely passed a lot of services so that I can buckle down. And I found my calling. I found my calling for someone who has struggled myself for 8-9 years just to maintain a healthy weight. And now GLP-1s microdosing have allowed me to maintain that basically dream physique that I could always get to, but I could never keep it. Now I can maintain a six pack and, relative six pack with pretty dang level of ease that just wasn't possible before. So,
and that was my experience as well, too. It was like, that was the holy grail for somebody. I'm 51 years old. I'm in menopause. I'm actually in the best shape of my life. And I'm microdosing tirzepatide. And people have tried shaming me all over the internet, calling it, you're doing it for vanity reasons. You're taking medication away from people that really need it. There isn't a medication shortage. We can all get tirzepatide and semaglutide all over the US. I'm not taking medication away from diabetics, and it isn't for vanity purposes, because as my midsection was growing, I knew that I was at risk for heart disease, fatty liver disease, certain kinds of cancer, type 2 diabetes, dementia. So that was not acceptable to me to jeopardize my health by accepting that menopausal weight gain.
100%, 100%. People are always shocked when you share with them that optimal health, and there's many, many aspects to contribute to optimal health. But if you're talking about body fat percentage specifically, like, hey, what's the best range for optimal health? The level beyond which, okay, it is vanity. And people are shocked. Usually around 15% for men, you should start seeing some abdominal muscles, and about 18, 19 for women. Most people, if they actually knew what that looked like, if you show them a picture, they'd be like, whoa, that's super fit, for your average person, which, makes sense because when it seems so out reality, you just put it into another category and you think, well, I just want to get healthy. Well, that is optimal, right?
That is
And
optimal. 20% for women. Yeah.
yeah.
And
And
then, and
so
also our standards are based on US standards, not World Health Organization standards. That's a whole other conversation. But yes, I always say to people like, this is optimal. This is what it looks like. And it's so foreign to them. And they're like, oh no, those are like bodybuilders. I'm like, but they're not. This is optimal health.
this is optimal health. Yeah. I can go on and on about raising the bar. It is sad that society is lowering the bar for people. It's lowering the bar, and that's what people ultimately want to hear. But because people will only rise to the challenge that's presented with them. And so deep down, they would prefer to be led and to be pushed and to be motivated because everybody wants to win. But if you don't present that challenge, if you don't tell somebody, hey, you can do better, here's what it looks like, they're going to settle for mediocrity because that's the easiest thing in front of them. I mean, look, life right now is hard enough to freaking survive. And so put another challenge on my plate, I'm going to push it away unless you can get me to understand that challenge is actually a doable thing. It's possible, tangible. Here's why you need it. This prevents, and bringing it back to more specificity here, by maintaining a healthy body fat, I'm basically going to prevent all cause mortality. Like help me understand that connection. Let's put some pharmaceutical companies out of business,
Yeah.
and maintain optimal health. But now you got to be careful even saying that. I won't even say that kind of stuff on live because it's like, well,
Oh, they'll come
obvious
get you.
reasons.
But the thing is like, I always say GLP-1s are a tool in our toolbox. I talk about the 5 factors of health every single time I talk to everybody, especially doctors. I need you to sleep 8 hours a night. I need you to hydrate. You got to drink 3 liters of water. You've got to mitigate the stress. You were just talking about stress. Our lives are stressful. I'm not telling you that your life isn't going to be stressful or avoid it, but you got to figure out a way to mitigate it. We got to get moving, even if that means you've never moved a day in your life. We got to get you walking, and then we got to get you resistance training. And then we got to start focusing on nutrition, your protein, your healthy fats, and then your high fiber fruits and vegetables. I got to do those 5 things. Those are the tools in your toolbox. But now we have GLP-1s, which is our 6th tool, is embracing science, which is really cool. I've followed peptides for a very long time, like yourself, but I really think that these GLP-1s are the biggest game changer we've seen in the weight loss industry in my lifetime.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. So let's talk about those hormones, leptin, ghrelin, insulin. I know insulin's going to be like a bigger conversation, so we'll talk about that last, but tell us a little bit about leptin and ghrelin and how that just affects who we are as people living day to day.
Yeah. So, leptin is a hormone that's produced by your fat cells. And leptin is responsible for communicating like what's happening as far as energy in versus energy out. As your fat cells get fatter, as your fat cells begin to increase in size, there's a signal that it can send to the rest of your body, specifically your brain, the hypothalamus, to say, hey, we're getting bigger. We need to slow things down. And so the body can get that signal and respond by doing 2 major things: decreasing your appetite and increasing your caloric expenditure, right? So changing your metabolic rate. And just the ability to change your metabolic rate right there on cue from a hormone is the very reason why calories in versus calories out is just doesn't make sense, because you have the very metric of how much you burn, because the majority of calories you burn does not come from exercise. Actually, about 60-70% comes from that basal metabolic rate at rest. Well, your body could literally crank that one way or the other, and it's hormones that influence that. So literally leptin has that ability to do that. And as much as we understand how powerful that is, when we first discovered leptin, they tried to come up with medications. Well, if we just improve leptin, and they found out it didn't work, and they figured out that there was something called leptin resistance. And so now, there's still research, of course, going on, looking into leptin. But truth be told, it's like you mentioned earlier, I kind of alluded to that already, that leptin and ghrelin, we should know what they are. Some people do have some genetic issues and some nuances with it, but they really follow suit with insulin.
Yeah. So, and then ghrelin is what tells us like we're satiated, correct?
So ghrelin is produced. So ghrelin's produced by the stomach, and that's your hungry. That's a hungry peptide, a hungry hormone. So a lot of different cues actually for ghrelin release, which is fascinating because I know you are, and you probably know, obviously for me, I'm a big proponent of fasting. So one of the powerful cues of ghrelin is just timing of eating. But before we even get into that, its main function is to prepare you to eat, to make you hungry, to drive and create a motivation of that physical hunger from the stomach. And there's a lot of aspects to how ghrelin can interplay with leptin and insulin too as well. But at its base, that's what ghrelin is. So when ghrelin's up, you're hungry. And
Regardless if you've eaten or not, it has really nothing to do with whether or not you're eating, because you get that ghrelin imbalance, your body's ghrelin isn't working properly, then you get all these cues that are going all over the place.
Correct. Emptiness of the stomach is one cue for it. Timing is one cue for it. So this is one of the main reasons I love fasting, is because literally fasting is restricting the time of the day when you're not eating, right? The typical is just skip breakfast, compress the eating window to 8 hours. So if you're normally eating breakfast, your body will normally, based off the circadian rhythm, which is your internal clock, and a very, very, very important thing, your circadian rhythm, which is why sleeping on a schedule is a very important thing. But the more you can anchor that rhythm, the more your body can make decisions to do certain things at certain optimal times. And so just by delaying breakfast over time, it becomes easier. One of the reasons it becomes easier is because you stop making ghrelin. You just literally stop making ghrelin, the very hormone that is causing your body to not only be hungry, but to prepare for food intake, to get the enzyme production started, and everything else that would be involved with smooth facilitation of the digestive process, which would make sense. You want ghrelin, doing its thing before eating, but not when you're not eating, right? And so, it's a cool little example of how we can optimize our hormone pathways. And anybody says that fasting is the same thing as caloric restriction, don't get me started there. And there is some very, very prominent social media influencers that I have so much respect for. One in particular, I'm going to say his name because I've already made a video, Dr. Mike Israetel. I love the guy's a genius, by the way. So I'm not even trying to say I'm smarter than him, because I would be afraid to say that, number one. Number two, I basically agree with almost everything he says, but I made a podcast where I'm challenging him, because I know he's probably going to make fun of me with his response, but I'm cool with that. I can handle that. But I do challenge his opinion, because he is very focused on, at the end of the day, it really just comes down to calories, and he's sticking with it. And anyways, we can go
really
on.
crazy. It's a really crazy conversation that we're still talking about calories in and calories out in 2024, because the reason why I'm so passionate about weight loss is because my mother suffered her entire life from obesity. From the time I can remember, my mom was on the most current Reader's Digest diet. My mom limited her calories down to 900 calories for a portion of my life, and she maybe lost 10 pounds and then couldn't keep it off. And we don't talk about metabolic set point enough. We don't talk about any of these things enough. And now that I've become so educated, it is sad and tragic to me that GLP-1s were not available to my mom, and access to all of this information wasn't available to my mom before she passed away, because she really, up until the day she passed away, suffered from obesity.
Wow. Yeah, no, it's that expression, what a day to be alive, what a time to be alive now.
Yeah,
Right?
what a time to be alive. It's really exciting. So the majority of the patients that you're running into, it's truly some form of insulin resistance that they either have genetically, or it's something that's presented in the last few years, or menopause has caused, or whatever. But the majority of your patients that are struggling with obesity, it's because of insulin resistance.
Yeah, and just to make clear kind of where I'm at with leptin and ghrelin, I think that there's so much that we still don't understand. So when I say it's all about insulin, I guess if I want to be more technically accurate, it's my confident understanding of the things that I do to fix insulin that I have less understanding may just simultaneously be also fixing leptin and ghrelin, right? And how that works, we don't know yet. So I talk about insulin because we know the direct mechanisms, and I understand of the things that I'm coaching people in is working on insulin. And I never have to have a conversation with patients about leptin or ghrelin. It rarely comes up, unless you got a true leptin genetic base deficiency, and they do have medications for that. So outside of those pretty rare situations, there are just things that we do to improve metabolic health, and maybe they're just improving all three of them at the same time. I mean, that's probably what's happening, and over time we'll tell. But to answer your question, yes, I just kind of wanted to give that nuance.
Well, let me interject there a second. The reason why I wanted to just throw in leptin and ghrelin, and I know that really in what I do, we're working on insulin as well. But the reason why I wanted to just kind of give a high level understanding of leptin and ghrelin is I just want people to understand there's a lot of hormones at play. It isn't just one. And there are doctors still telling clients of mine that cannot eat an apple that they're not insulin resistant because they can't test for it. It's such a great, and I have a client that if she eats an apple, she gains weight, and she does. And she literally eats protein, green vegetables, and healthy fats, and that is it. And if she diverts from any of that, she gains weight. And her endocrinologist told her, that's not possible. You must be cheating on your diet or drinking alcohol. And she gets accused of it pretty frequently. And she's like, I can't even eat an apple and no doctor will help me. So that's why I wanted to talk about leptin and ghrelin as well as insulin, just so patients know that there's a lot of things at play that affect their metabolism, their hunger, and their success with a weight loss program.
100%. No, I know. And I'm glad you brought them up. Real quick before you go on to the next question, that it really is so wild to me, that endocrinologist that made that, and brilliant people fall victim to this fallacy regarding research, where if I can't prove, if there's no study that shows me A equals A, okay, fine. I can't prove A equals A. Because I can't prove A equals A, or I guess I should say A equals B, then that doesn't mean that A doesn't equal B. Just because I can't prove it doesn't mean it can't be true. It just means I haven't proved it to be true yet.
Yes.
And so, but unfortunately, like that example you just gave, because we haven't proven A to B equals B, the doctor now is drawing that conclusion. Well, what you're saying can't be true. That scenario can't exist because we haven't proven it to be true. Instead of saying, well, maybe this is an example of something that we haven't proven to be true, and then just open up my eyes and just, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look around and say, there's a really other big, massive, contradictory hypothesis and theory that's well beyond that everybody's working with, seems to be working. And maybe that's the thing,
Yeah.
and, but that's just.
But I also asked my client, I said, is your doctor thin or heavy? Very first question I asked her doctor, and she said, my doctor is thin.
Yeah.
So this is a doctor that's never experienced these kind of struggles. And so if science didn't tell her this is true, she doesn't have anything anecdotal to fall back on like you and I do. The fact that you and I struggle with our weight our whole lives, it opened our eyes up to a lot of other things that people that have never struggled with their weight don't understand.
100%. And then just understanding the corruption that exists in the healthcare system, which is a whole other conversation. It's a whole other...
But it's a good conversation. I mean, that leads us to why we can't get tirzepatide right now, because there's a corruption in the healthcare system. Although the FDA looks like they're going to approve tirzepatide outside of Eli Lilly, which is a whole other story for another conversation. But
yeah.
So we'll go back to insulin resistance. So the majority of the patients you're seeing that truly are struggling with obesity, the majority of them, it's some form of insulin resistance.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen an overweight person who's not insulin resistant. I suppose it could exist, but I think it's more common to see a skinny person who's also insulin resistant. I think that while that's rare, I've seen a couple of those, but to see the opposite, to see an overweight, fat person who's inflamed and just dealing with these issues, not be insulin resistant, I haven't seen that. But I think in theory, I suppose it could exist. And I think if maybe the rapid weight gain was very recently due to some maybe some stress in the life and it was short lived and they were otherwise metabolically healthy prior, maybe. But I don't know. Maybe they would still develop the insulin resistance quickly. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's possible, truthfully.
So the majority of your weight loss clients are insulin resistant. And do you determine that through a conversation with them, or do you determine that through lab work and conversation, historical information? How do you determine that?
Well, objectively, we'll do a fasting insulin and C-peptide test, but like we said, we know they are. I added that test into our standard kind of upper tier weight loss panel, but it was really more for the patients. I mean, it didn't change us, didn't change what we did clinically, getting the fasted insulin C-peptide. It was more for them to be like, hey, like here's something I can think with, show their doctors, yada yada yada. So I'm glad we added it, but it didn't change anything for us. It did not.
Yeah.
There was no examples of like where it made a clinical difference to us whatsoever, but it made them happy.
And
I think that's valuable.
It's super valuable because a lot of patients are a product of our healthcare system that says if we cannot test for it, it must not be the problem. And so because our patients are a product of our current healthcare system, we do need those tools. I was going to say not only to sell our services, but to explain to them why our services are so important outside of traditional medicine. Because traditional medicine, first of all, they aren't doing these tests. And secondly, they don't know how to do anything actionable once they do get this information on these tests. So once the patient comes to you and they go through and they take their tests and you're like, okay, we definitely need to put you on a program. What does the framework of a program look like for them?
Yeah. So our go-to is the combination of a GLP-1. My favorite fat loss peptide to stack with it is AOD 9604, and we can get into specifics of these peptides. But in a general quick sense, it's a very powerful fat mobilizing peptide. So fat mobilization is what I want to do, and I think that's the last piece that GLP-1s don't do as good. So we stack those two together, and then we pair it with the flow protocol. So the flow protocol is what I've created. So flow, spelled Floa, and people call it Floa, but I was coming up with in the beginning, it really was centered around fasting and long fasting. So, to be clear, we get patients into weekly rounds of 48 hours is sort of like the templated kind of goal, and then we individualize it per person. You'd be surprised. A lot of people do really well with 48 hours per week. Now, this is not for life, but this is for anywhere between 3 to 6 months, depending on the person and how much fat they have on their body. You take a 300-pound woman who's 5'6". I mean, she's got 150 pounds of fat at least that she needs to lose. You really think she's going to exercise all that off?
Well, they can't exercise. I mean, let's be honest. If you're 5'5" and 300 pounds, you can barely go for a walk. And so fasting is such a great alternative. I use a lot of circadian rhythm fasting with my clients because they're just not ready for your fasting is the next generation of my fasting. I start with circadian rhythm fasting with my clients. But by the way, getting them to go 12 hours of like 4:30 p.m. to 4:30 a.m. or 5 p.m. to 5 a.m., just that 12 hours of circadian rhythm, it has a huge impact on their ability to lose weight. It's really great.
Yeah. So the flow is centered around long, deep fasting. And we have what I call the 10 pillars of lasting weight loss. Just briefly going, it's funny, listen to you. And a lot of coaching kind of have some sort of numbers and pillars and totems. So it's always cool. It's always cool. So my 10 is the eating less processed foods, eating less carbohydrates, the flow fasting, the heavyweight training, the supplement regimens, the stress, the sleep, the inflammation, the hormones, and the mindset. So those are my 10 pillars. Water is thrown into the nutrition side. So, and then that includes the high protein. So, but really these pillars are all about metabolic health. Yep. And so our goal is to achieve lasting weight loss, permanent weight maintenance by utilizing the lowest dose possibles of GLP-1s and peptides paired with these lifestyles so that we can get some permanent correction. And then depending on the person's mindset, like, do you want to completely wean off the medications and maintain your weight? Do you want to maintain a microdose, an intermittent use protocol, which is kind of another conversation, intermittent protocol? I would bundle into that microdosing kind of category. Micro protocol, I don't know what you would call that one, but microdosing is just less every week, but there's also the concept of just doing less and not every week. So
Yeah.
some sort of version of that, if you want
I
to
call what
maintain
I
your
do
weight with that.
microdosing, and I take 5 milligrams every 30, for whatever reason, it's 33 days. That's what my body liked, was exactly 33 days. So 5 milligrams every 33 days, I still call it microdosing. It's not 5 milligrams a week. And so it just, for whatever reason, that's what my body liked.
Interesting. So that's a medium dose, but you're only doing it once a month. That's cool.
And
That's
I didn't need it 28 days, and I couldn't go 35 days. It was 33 days was the sweet spot of it. It was really fascinating.
Yeah, and I think there's so much that obviously there's so much more that we need to understand, and unfortunately the big research, the high level conclusive stuff that costs the big bucks, we're never going to get that on microdosing, and we know why.
Yeah.
So it's always going to be this sort of off label, gunslinging approach, but at least like who. It's lower doses. Like who's going to argue that there's a danger? Oh, you're not supposed to follow that protocol. It's less than your protocol.
Yeah. I say this all the time. I have a client that was trying to get 1.25 of tirzepatide, and she can't get it in Mounjaro because the pens come bottom at 2.5. And so she's trying to get it from the compounding pharmacy, and the compounding pharmacy won't send it to her because it's off the FDA short list. And she's saying, but 1.25 is not even applicable to the FDA. She knew more about the FDA shortlist than the pharmacy did. And finally, of course, I sent her to one of my pharmacies, and they, of course, made her a 1.25, and they make a lot of 1.25s for a lot of doctors like yourself that do microdose tirzepatide.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing.
So
anyways, going back to basically what you asked, like that's a summary of kind of how we approach things. My medical practitioners are the ones that do all the prescriptions, which is great. I know sometimes it's like, you're a DC, what are you doing? And I've heard it all. So to me, I'm numb to it, but I do the weight loss coaching. But as you can imagine, when I'm doing the coaching, my providers are coming to me and asking me, what are you seeing? What's going on? Like, so I'm, and I'm just
my doctors come to me and ask me the same questions every day.
It's I'm fascinated. I studied the literature and have a pretty good understanding of kind of what is going on here. And so, anyways.
That's because we're the boots on the ground. The doctors are writing scripts and they're doing their jobs, but we're really the boots on the ground that hear the stories and have the day-to-day conversations, but also our patients feel comfortable having those conversations with us. So they're going to share more with whoever their coach is. That's the nature of coaching. So do you think that you are reversing insulin resistance, or are you managing their insulin resistance?
It's an awesome question. Does anybody reverse their diabetes, or do they put it into remission? And to me, I think it's a tomato thing. I mean, I'd love to have that conversation, and I guess it depends on what's the difference. Like when I think of remission, I think of something that's no longer an active issue, but can be potentially susceptible to come back with more ease than somebody who individually progresses with the disease, versus reversal would be you're back to normal, but normal people can also progress to diabetes too. So Correct. It just means the threshold probably for remission is maybe higher or lower to regress than somebody with reversal. But I mean, how am I going to answer that question? I don't know. They don't have diabetes anymore. They don't have obesity anymore. Call it whatever you want to call it. I don't care, And so, but it's a cool question. And that's
I think the tomatoes of that is people are asking, they're like trying to say what we do isn't important because we don't reverse insulin resistance. We don't reverse type 2 diabetes. You're just putting it in remission. And I often say the same thing. I don't really care. If my clients are healthier, happier, they're going to live to be 90 years old and play with their grandchildren. That is all they're going to be able to walk their daughter down the aisle for her wedding. That is all I care about. I don't care about the semantics of what we do from a healthcare perspective.
No, I mean, if you don't have diabetes or obesity, you don't have diabetes and obesity. Whether the threshold to getting it back is different, it doesn't matter. And then I question too, does anybody get, if there really is a difference, who's actually reversing diabetes, right? But it doesn't matter at the end of the day. So
yeah, it doesn't. So do all of your insulin resistant clients also have type 2 diabetes, or are they mutually exclusive?
No, yeah. So I just bring that up as an example, but we definitely have more in the obese category, non-diabetics, but we get a decent amount of diabetic patients too as well, type twos. Obviously, type one is a whole nother beast. We're not dealing with that.
Yeah.
And there are, I think, great functional people that do specialize in type one diabetes. It's just not us. And we're definitely dealing with you're obese, you're insulin resistant, you're pre-diabetic, you're medication based, non-insulin dependent diabetics. And I got a dude right now who's on insulin, and he's no longer on insulin. As of last week, he's no longer on his insulin. So and it's just amazing. He was like, I would have never thought this was going to happen. Like, I thought this was just no option. And that's because the narrative that most practitioners are operating off of. So therefore they communicate it to their patients is that diabetes and obesity, right, are chronic irreversible diseases
Yeah.
that the best we can do is manage your symptoms.
Well, the other thing about insulin too is when you have somebody that needs insulin, you give them insulin and then they become insulin dependent. And then they become even more obese because they're insulin dependent. And so that's that rabbit hole that our type 2 diabetic clients go down. In my experience with my clients, I ask them for their blood work. So they'll go, oh, I had my checkup. I'll say, hey, can you send me your blood work? And they're pre-diabetic. And I'll say, hey, did your doctor point out that you're pre-diabetic? And they're like, no, my doctor says all my blood work looks great. Not fine. Their blood work looks great and they're pre-diabetic. I said, look, I don't want you to become diabetic. We need to make some small lifestyle changes. I want to catch it here, not wait till it gets all the way over here. So it is fascinating because I don't ever want my clients to ever have to get on insulin if they don't have to.
It's 100%. When you look up the definition of health, it's kind of crazy, right? Have you looked up the definition of like textbook definition?
No. I think I'm afraid to.
Yeah, you should be. It's absence of disease. That's what we're calling health. I mean, not we're, but the system. It's absence of disease. And when you look up optimal health, you get all these crazy long paragraph long descriptions. Like, why is optimal health so confusing to define? It's because because you're adding the word optimal in front of it. Well, if the definition of if the definition of health is so basic, well, now optimal has to be all complicated because we all have an idea of what optimal means. It's like that high level, right? I'm optimal. I'm functioning at my highest level.
I was just going to say, we're functioning at our most efficient. That would be optimal to me. Functioning at my most efficient.
Yeah, I'm working on version 2 of my book, and I really sat down and was like, how would I define this? How would I define this? Last iteration I left off was highest level of survivability while utilizing the lowest amount of medications when needed. So I think that part of it is so important because when you need medications, you need medications. Yeah. I'm like, you need them, right? Don't let yourself get a heart attack because of hypertension or have go into a coma because of blood sugar issues, like whatever is going on, use the medications, but when needed, right? And that's where, I did a response to a video yesterday, where this is a patient talking, a popular creator, I will be on this medication for the rest of my life and I'm okay with that, and, she's not talking about microdosing. She's talking about a standard kind of dose. But even if she was talking about a microdose, it's just an interesting situation, right? To feed yourself. You don't have a crystal ball. You don't know what's going to happen in the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. If you don't need a medication and you can maintain that highest level of health, then great. Right? And you're not going to ever figure it out until you try, knowing that you can always go backwards. And so I just
try not living with it and see what happens.
You have to kind of play with it. So
yeah, and I say that to our patients all the time. They're so afraid to go off. That's the last thing about my insulin resistant patients. They know that they've struggled with their weight their entire lives. They know they're insulin resistant. They're so afraid to go off the medication. They start to use it as a crutch. And that is one of the things I really coach on is it's okay. You can always go back on it. So let's titrate you off. And then let's see when you need it again. And I do think with a lot of mine, the food noise comes back. And that's been the biggest thing because they didn't realize they had food noise until they started the medication. And then once they stopped thinking about food, it is so liberating to not think about food. They don't want to ever have to control that again. And so you kind of have to coach them into controlling food noise naturally without having to use it.
Yeah, I think the vision that I have when it comes to that is, you got to work with the reality of the patient, knowing that it's dynamic and it's going to change. And so if at the moment that's what they need, if they're okay with being on the medication, they understand the risks, they understand all of that, that's where they're at, great. But it might change in 6 months, it might change in a year, right? And so just allowing some movement in that,
Yeah, I just say
and
allow
and
yourself
meeting
to
them where they're
break.
at.
You're allowed to change your mind. It's like you're not in a marriage. You're allowed to change your mind at any moment in this journey, no matter what that is and what that means to you. You're allowed to change your mind, and that's okay. And that's part of like meeting your patients where they're at.
100%, 100%.
So last question, if you had one word of advice for anybody considering a GLP-1 weight loss program, what would that one word of advice be, or one sentence paragraph of advice be?
Somebody who's considering starting GLP-1s,
Yeah.
right? How can I not be biased and say come to us? But I think
Well, I always say I want you to make sure you go to somebody who's reputable. You're going to get the medication from a reputable source, a really good compounding pharmacy, and you're going to get coaching. In addition to all of that, what would be your one word of advice? Because I agree with you on that.
Okay, cool. So we got the reputable source, you're getting the coaching, all that kind of stuff. I think it would be no different than anybody honestly starting a weight loss program without GLP-1 medications. What would I tell somebody 8 years ago? I would say sit down, run this activity, take 15 minutes, put your phone away, and really sit down and have a moment with yourself and really, why are you doing this? Like, why? I want to lose weight. Why? And just keep asking yourself that question. Why? And this is a bit of an activity that I do with people, have them do. This should become emotional. The deeper you dig into the reasons why you're trying to make these lifestyle changes and why you're trying to achieve weight loss, should always be, almost most of the time, emotional.
Yes.
And then you start asking yourself a couple other questions I like is like, on a positive note, like what's going to happen in 5 years when you do this? Visualize it. Like, what's it going to look like? What kind of people are you going to be talking to? What kind of activities are you going to be doing? Who's that person you're going to chase if you're single and now you have the confidence that you need? Like, just visualize it. Get yourself pumped and excited. That should be positive. And then the tough one, what's going to happen in 10 years if you don't make these changes? And that's like the gut dropping, like, holy shit, like,
Yes.
and some people, like, you might be dead. Like, I'm not going to be alive if I don't fucking do this in the next 10 years. And so I think that, and really just getting your mindset piece into it, if I'm summarizing, that's what we're talking about, but really getting honest and straight with yourself behind the reasons and confronting those and having that moment with yourself. And truthfully, deep down, every human being has this vibration towards survival. Like, we all want that, but we're muddled against the many different philosophies and religions call it many different things, but there's this sort of chaos that we have, or kind of a Casey craziness, and you're up against that.
Yeah.
And that's a compilation of all the painful experiences you've ever gone through in your entire life. And so you have to really sit there and kind of resonate with yourself. And you can tell when you're being you, and you can tell when you're being reactive, because the reactive stuff is like when you're not thinking the way that you want to think, or when you are thinking a way that you're like, what? That's not me. Like, why am I doing that? Why am I saying that? Oh, that's not you. And so you got to kind of get to that core of you. And then, and because some people are living all reactive all the time, that they don't even know who they are at times, or they only get glimpse
100%.
moments. And so they kind of have to set back, and that whole activity should be powerful. And it's obviously, it's not the easiest thing to do on your own. It helps if someone can help you there. But even like just listening to this listening to the way I explain it, a partner can do it on you really well too. It should be your significant other, because they know you so well. And they'll make sure that you're not BSing the situation and you're getting down to the root. So I think that is the most powerful thing anybody can do starting a weight loss journey.
So doing a thought exercise before you start any type of weight loss journey, including GLP-1s, I think is an incredible word of advice. It isn't something we had talked about, so I'm so happy that you brought it up, because it's really, really important. Dr. Jones, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me and being on this episode of Conversations about a New Era of Weight Management and GLP-1 weight loss medications. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Sharon.
Thanks. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Weight Loss Decoded GLP Edition podcast. My name is Sharon Polsky, your GLP Fact Fairy. And if you liked today's episode, if you could please subscribe, like, and share with your friends, that would be great. I also want to remind you that these are just the opinions of myself and my guests and should not be interpreted as medical advice. Until next time, ciao for now.